Hi, my name is Aurora Ascension, and I am the English professor and tutor for Polytechnic University. And tonight I am finishing my part four of how to write a technical or engineering report or paper. So I'm going to be sharing my screen with you to share my PowerPoint. And for those of you who have been through part one, two, and three, this is basically the setup for success is using grammar correctly. Remember, you have to memorize the forms of the verb to be, so you'll use them appropriately. And also, you have to memorize the irregular verbs. This is a mind map when you are creating a research paper or an essay or maybe a technical report. This is a wonderful way for you to organize your ideas. Um, Here I reviewed the past, present, future, punctuation, active and passive verb, fragmented run-on sentences, subject-verb agreement, and then part two was essay writing using Office Word. Remember, I don't like Grammarly because Grammarly stops you every time. I don't like to be stopped. I like to write with all my mistakes. And then after I write with all my mistakes, I go into review, spell check, and grammar, and I correct my spelling. And here it tells you, the ideas of how to write, how to revise. Remember, you can always leave your paper sitting for one night and then go back to it. This is part of the paragraph. The same idea as a part of the paragraph is the same idea as part of an essay. The topic sentence is your very first sentence that gives you a general idea, the gist of what's within that paragraph. And the supporting sentences will add support to that main topic sentence. I see that a lot of my writers, what they do is they have one supporting sentence and then they go over and over and over the same thing. And that doesn't show that you're critically thinking, and that's what your professor wants to see. And of course, your concluding sentence that wraps it up. And here I have an example. A thesis statement. This is going to be so important for your research paper, for your capstone, for your dissertation, for your technical report, for your essay. The thesis statement is the basis of your essay. It's what controls your essay. If you're writing a research paper, if you're writing a capstone that has many paragraphs, the best thing to do is have a question. And with the question, then you can write as many paragraphs as you want to. Here, in the case of this example, you would be writing each paragraph stating the consequences of eating fast foods. You can have a plan of development if it's a shorter paragraph, which means that you can divide three main subjects and keep it in one statement. So your three main subjects are going to be your three main headers in your paper. You can have a research paper, a summary paper using a plan of development. My students have done that. And all you do is you have mini essays within each part of your essay. Okay, you can have an open statement. An open statement would be saying many ways, many reasons, many options, the latest trends, pros and cons, advantages, disadvantages, certain problems, many reasons. I used that already. So those are key words that open the reader for your essay. Generational differences can affect the workplace in many ways. Wow, many ways. How will a generational difference affect the workplace? So there I am going to write an essay and probably divide it into three generations and say the baby boomers, the technological generation, and the new generation now. I think it's called the I forgot what it was called, but anyway, You can divide it like that. It will help you organize your essay. That's the main thing. If you organize your essay, you can write an essay in half an hour. Many companies are giving job interviews, are giving you a question, and are telling you, write an essay. If you're not prepared to do so, you are going to have problems. Here's the essay organization that I was talking about. Your hook, your attention grabbers, these are strategies you can use to start with your essay. But very important, your thesis is the last sentence in your introductory paragraph. Your body paragraphs always start with topic sentences and usually start with a transitional word or a transitional phrase. So include that. And in your conclusion, you restate your theses. You go back and you say your theses in a different way. You summarize your main points, you give your final comments, you give your recommendations, you predict. Here, your transitional words, you can have many more aside from these. The APA is basically, these are rules for APA. Just go through them. APA, you are just writing what you read. You are reading an article and you're putting it in your own words. You're writing it out. So watch out for these rules. And just today I was reading something, an email I got that they were talking about, I don't know, it was like a DCL. Well, what's a DCL? You know what a DCL is, but if you don't tell me what it is, I won't know. So you have to write out what DCL means, then in parentheses DCL. And the way that you start sentences and citations. You have to have a citation in each one of your body paragraphs of the essay. Now, this is an example. If you have this this example, that this is a phrase that someone said, you put Smith, comma, 2018, close parenthesis, the period outside the parenthesis. If you're using somebody's exact words, you have the quotation marks, then you have the comma, and then you have Smith 2018. Okay, then we know it's Smith. You have according to Smith. And here you have, when you have according to, or Smith says, or Smith retaliated, or Smith argued, or Smith declared, or Smith researched, you will have, you could just use the doctor's last name. You have then the year in parentheses and a comma, okay? If you have more than two authors, you have an apperchen with the two authors, okay? Or if you have more than three, you use the phrase et al., which means that you have more than three authors. You cannot use Wikipedia, you cannot use bloggers, you cannot use encyclopedia or dictionary. You can use a dictionary definition, but it is not counted as a reference, okay? So your references have to have author's current date and be from a reliable source. You should have a current date that's at least 5 years, because more than 5 years, probably the information is obsolete. In your Google search, I always put articles on and put one of your subtopics there, because if I do that, I find that I could easily get more articles with authors. Here you have an article, and you have an example about using a reference generator. You have Sonnet Citation, you have Citation Machine, you have FastCite. I personally like Citation Machine. Now, when it comes out, you have to double space it and make sure that it's hanging, which means that the second line is indented, okay? This is the new APA manual. It is the 7th edition. The rules have changed. They're a little bit more lenient. They can accept other writing besides Times New Roman 12. Font, I will tell you that I prefer that you keep to New Times Roman 12 font. That's what I use for all my correspondence, and I use that for all my emails. I find that it's easier to read. And that's what you want. You want to make it easier for your audience to read. Now, for the last part, finally, report writing. Be careful with the spelling, because as engineers, you have a lot of brand names. And I'm just using these as an example. iPad, iPhone, PowerPoint. Look at PowerPoint. This is a brand name. Power and point go together, and the P is capitalized. So be careful when you have brand names, especially when you're an engineer. You have to be careful about that. When you're writing a technical report, use action verbs. This is a list of action verbs. You can also Google that and find action verbs for technical reports or for capstones, and you will find a lot of them. Here, if you notice that these words make you sound more professional, and at the same time give your reports more of an action, more of a validity, because you're using something that can be done. Jargons and collocations. Our jargon is technical language. So here I have websites with mechanical engineer, with computer engineering. You can look through them, and they have a series of vocabulary words. Let me see if this opens up. And all you have to do is check glossary of electrical engineering terms. Look at how many terms you have, and it has a definition. I would suggest that you always have a glossary and talk to your professors, because I'm sure that your professors have given you a glossary of engineering terms. Jargon in Spanish is jerga. Collocations, I just finished teaching that, and it's funny because it's when two words together mean something. So you have, for instance, business plan. You have market report. You have tax investment. You have words that together have a certain meaning in the business sector of the world. So when you are looking, you can also look for collocations in electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, which means that you have to pay attention not only just to words, but also to phrases that will make your English stand out when you're writing. Please do not write idioms, sayings, colloquialisms, los dichos. Don't write that when you're writing a capstone and a professional report. It's not to be understood. Here you have a few words that have to do with business, and it just keep in mind that sometimes you have two words together that mean something. Useful link. The Polytechnic University has their own library, and this is the link for the library. If you cannot find what you're looking for in the library, you can call the number that's right next to the sign-in page. I just called them today. I spoke to Mario. I had a situation, and he clarified everything for me. So a useful link would be the Polytechnic Library, because it has journals that are written and researched upon. So you're talking about good, solid information. However, you can also Google your information. When you're Googling, Google articles on, because that will take you directly to an article that has a author. So Google, you have to be careful, because you're trying to find websites that are reliable, and you want to make sure that you have the best and updated information. When you're writing, it's not a matter of writing about what you know. It's a matter of digging deeper, going deeper into your subject, and being able to extract and bring about new knowledge and compare the knowledge that you have with the author. You can also just spread out, think of all the angles. The more that you develop your critical thinking in writing, the better it will be, especially for you as an engineer. It's going to be very important that you develop that critical thinking. You're able to look at all the angles and look at different alternatives. Have a plan A, B, C, and D. Just in case something goes wrong, you have a backup. You know what to do. Same thing in writing. It's going to help you develop your skills. The manual, the APA manual, is listed in the library. You can look at it. And also I found the Business Writer's Handbook. That might be something that you might look at. Basically, just to give you an idea of how you would write a research paper, there are two types of paper that you might be able, you might write. And one of them is, say, an expository essay, because even though it's a research paper, it's geared more towards an expository essay. An expository essay is just giving you reasons. It's just giving you ways. It's just giving you information. So here you have a link that you can go to and look at what an expository essay is. But expository essay is just giving you, like, what are the three types of COVID? Instead of saying what are the pros and cons of using the COVID vaccine, or what are the three types of COVID vaccine? See, this is different. An expository essay is just giving you information. Now, here, this is an interesting, this says a successful completion of the paper depends on the understanding of the topic only, but your ability to create a functional structure. So not only do you have to know the topic, you can research the topic, but you need to have a functional structure. That's why it's useful to construct outlines for your writing. I showed you before that you could do a mind map, but you could also do an outline. Here, your introduction has a hook. If you can't think of a hook at the moment that you're writing, that's fine. I wouldn't start writing the introductory paragraph. I would go straight into your body paragraphs, then go back. And when you finish your essay, write your introductory paragraph, write your concluding paragraph. It's easier. Once I've noticed that a few of my students write their body paragraph, and once it comes to a conclusion, they run out of steam. Very important. The thesis statement is going to be the one that controls the whole essay. So make sure that you have a good, solid, viable thesis statement. Here you have body paragraphs, and it tells you that you can have fact 1, fact 2, plus evidence, and the analysis, which would probably be your concluding sentences. You're going to have topic 2 with your evidence and your facts, and then your analysis. You can have your topic 3 with your facts, your evidence, and your analysis. However, you can vary this differently. You can have your topic 1, say you have advantages and disadvantages. So you might start talking about the advantages of something. And then in your topic 2, you might jump to your disadvantages and provide the evidence and the details that you need to show what the disadvantages are, rather. And then you have your third paragraph where you can compare both the advantages and disadvantages according to one author. Okay? So remember, your body paragraphs have to be not your words, not your thoughts. It has to be the summary of someone else's words, the articles and the research that somebody else has written. I had a coworker of mine, a colleague of mine, God bless him, he's very intelligent. He's been working in the public school system for about 30 years, 35 years. I mean, this man has been there forever. And he was writing his doctorate degree, and he came to me and he said, I have a big problem. How can I write something that somebody else says when I know about this. Well, unfortunately, he did know about it, but his name did not have doctor in front of it. Only when your name has doctor in front of it can you create new information, and you have to base it on your research. So whatever you create, the new information you create has to have the basis. You have to be standing on solid ground. Like when you're building a house and you need a solid foundation, the same idea. You need to have a solid ground, and then you have to build upon it. Okay? So in your conclusion, you summarize the questions or the theses, you discuss the significance of the topic, you reveal unanswered questions, or you call to action. You can give your predictions, you can give your recommendation. That would be your call to action. So here you have a persuasive or an argumentative essay. This would be a different type of essay, where the expository essay is just giving you information, it's just teaching you something. Think about it as teaching, just giving you information. The persuasive or argumentative essay, here it's very picky, because here, remember, you can't use your ideas, but you cannot write everything in your own ideas. You have to write a pro and a con. You have to measure and weigh both sides of the argument to prove yourself unbiased. That's a very important word when you're doing research, when you're doing capstones. You have to prove yourself to be unbiased. So here, your structure and clarity. Does it identify a premise? Your thesis statement is what they call a premise, una premisa. You're trying to discover something. You're trying to analyze something. What are the pros and cons of getting the COVID vaccine? And here you have a premise. You have to have the the positive, the negative, the pros and the cons, weigh everything together. So is there evidence to support the premises? Very important. Sometimes you have a thesis statement, you have a premise, and then when you're researching on Google or through Polytechnic Library, you cannot find articles that are easy to read, articles that are good. You can't find anything, so therefore you might have to go back and look at your theses and vary it a bit. Also, you can use for my second language learners, you could use videos. There's a company called TED Talks, TED, where they have talks about authors, motivational speakers, people who are experts in the subject. PBS, it's a wonderful source of information. It's public broadcasting system. It's a channel on TV. They have wonderful engineering articles. Oh my gosh, they have the Impossible Bills, which I really love. So, just look for things that are going to help you support what you're saying. So is there a conclusion? Sometimes you don't have a conclusion. I had a student who wrote an essay, and based on her articles, she looked at me and she goes, I don't have a conclusion. So her conclusion was just that there needed to be more investigation on the topic to be able to prove or disprove the pros and the cons. Does it make sense? Is there any vagueness or confusion? Vagueness is when you're being wishy-washy, when you're repeating the same thing, or you're confusing your reader, or maybe you're mentioning something about it. Well, what's it? You're not telling me what it is. So very important, provide evidence. Assess reliability and credibility of your evidence. We've talked about that. Make sure it has an author. Make sure it's a reliable source. The .gov's website are fantastic. They don't need an author because they're government websites. Does the information come from a scholarly peer-reviewed source? Somebody who's an authority on the subject. Like I mentioned before, you have to have people who are authorities on the subject. Did the author incorporate the evidence through quotes and paraphrases into their arguments? That's what you have to do. You have to read what the author wrote and then incorporate their evidence into your arguments, into what you're writing. Logic. Did the author limit the amount of fallacies within their argument? Fallacy is something that may be wrong, or may be wrong, or maybe misunderstood, or maybe be stated, restated, and stated repetitively, or it could be circumvented. It could be something that goes, the reasoning goes around in circles and isn't clear. So be careful, because fallacy is a word that has to deal with critical thinking, and critical thinking is just, trying to avoid that slippery slope. Critical thinking calls that slippery slope when you keep rating and rating and rating and rating and rating. You're rating about the same thing. So be careful what you're doing there, okay? Is the argument sound? Is the argument made without bias? Again, bias, prejuicio. You have to be unbiased. You cannot be favoring. And okay, let's be honest. You will favor a certain point of view. We all will favor a certain point of view. But what you want to do is that you want to research the opposite information. And I've had many students writing essays that research the opposite information and find out that they actually are convinced with the opposite information. They said, oh, wait a minute, I don't believe this anymore. I've changed my line of thought because I have more evidence to prove the other point of view rather than the one that I originally have. So it's a way to expand your knowledge. Is the argument clear with valid logic and evidence? The clarity of your arguments will always go back to what we said here, your premise or your thesis statement. So make sure that controls the whole essay. Make sure that that's strong. In research writing, we have two sorts of writing. We have qualitative and quantitative research methods. Your quantitative like cantidad, research method is expressed in numbers and graphs. You have two broad categories, which are experimental and quasi-experimental. Okay, you can have an experiment, or you can have part of an experiment plus your qualitative, and I'll go into that now. The researcher may choose descriptive or inferential statistics to analyze the data, test of comparison, correlation analysis. So you might use, if you guys are into statistics, your calculus, this is so important for you in engineering. You're using figures, you're using tables, you're using your experiments. You're using your case studies. You're using your observation as recorded as numbers. You're using surveys with close-ended questions, yes or no, so you can count them. That's a close-ended question, a question that you can answer with yes or no. So you want to be able to measure and count. If you're using people for case studies, and this is very important, I took a training where I had to get a certificate and be certified for research, because when you're using people, you have to have, they have to sign a paper. Each person you use has to sign a paper giving you the authority to be using their information. So be careful with that always if you're using this type of research. If you're using a qualitative essay, you're expressing everything in words. You're explaining, you're predicting, you're investigating relationships, you're describing current conditions, you're examining possible impacts or influences on designated outcomes. So you can do these with interviews with open-ended questions. You can interview, but I would suggest that you can't, you don't interview your aunt or your neighbor. I would suggest you interview people that are scholarly people, people who know about the topic. You can survey, you can have surveys. In surveys, you have the random, the medium, the mean, you have the statistical language that you need to be able to talk about your survey also. Your questionnaires, your observations described in words, your control groups. You can have a group that has, that's for instance in medication. You have the control group, which is the group that doesn't get a medication, that gets sugar pills. And you have the other group that is the active group that it is getting the actual pills. So you have to have a group that's not being influenced by what you're studying. You have literature reviews that explore concepts and theories. So that's going to be very important also, okay? So this is just a brief analysis of this, but you can just dig in further into this. For instance, here I have a website that shows what a technical report and samples of engineering reports. So you could look at this website up here later on. You have letters of transmittal. Some people have to get a letter first to get permission to do their report. I had to do a little letter of transmittal for my professor in my report. You have a title page. Your title page usually follows the regulation of APA. You have an abstract. The abstract is 250 words, which describes what you're writing about. It's a summary of what you're writing about. You've got the table of contents. In which you list your contents, and you have to be careful because sometimes you have a bigger topic and then underneath it you have a subtopic. So that's where your power of making bosquejos, making outlines, it works. So your table of contents should be logically organized. Your list of figures, if you have graphs, if you have figures, you always have to list them and tell me where you got that information, or if you created that graph yourself, what does that graph mean? How are you showing the information? Your executive summary is a summary of the whole paper and should be written after you finish the paper, as well as the abstract should be written after you finish the paper. Some abstracts at the bottom have keywords. It's only 250 words, whereas the executive summary is more or less like a letter transmittal. An executive summary would be a letter that you're writing, say for the CEO of the company, or say for your direct supervisor, that you're analyzing 3 different sites that you could build on. And then you're giving the pros and cons of each site, of each place. And you want to give the executive summary as condensed, as brief as possible, but you have to make sure you're including the whole information. Glossary. Glossary would be vocabulary words. If there's something that you are, using, like I mentioned, the abstract has some words at the bottom. I think it allows maybe, up to 10 words, if I'm not mistaken, whereas your glossary could be a listing of the words that are going to be important to your paper, or if the paper is going to someone that is not an engineer, that's out of the business, you may want to specify what these words mean. So here we go to your paper. After all this, the first paragraph would be your introduction. Then you would have the body of your capstone or your paper, your research paper, your technical paper. And there you would elaborate it like I mentioned. And then you have your conclusion. This part here basically is a longer essay. Introduction, body, conclusion, it runs just like an essay, but it could be even longer than your usual essay. Then you have at the end, you can have your recommendations listed. You can have an appendix. In your appendix here, I would put it has an appendix, but before your appendix, it doesn't have a reference page. I would tell you that you would need a reference page, but your appendix would also tell me where you've gotten your vocabulary, where you picked up your resources, where you got your table, your list of figures and your graphs. So that's going to give you more information. Now, a technical report is meant to convey a specific message or to perform a particular function rather than to teach the reader about the topic. So you are going a little beyond your expository essay that you're just teaching with an expository essay. A technical report, you are giving a message, you're elaborating something, you're making something up. Many students' reports are written as if to inform the reader about what the student knows, rather than to persuade the reader that the presented solution is valid and viable. That's very important. Right here we have the very basic of what makes me pull out my hair, that some reports are written like from the student's point of view and what the limited information they knew, rather than going deeper into the subject. For instance, one student was writing about the COVID situation, and he started writing about what he observed, that the world closed and people couldn't go out and toilet paper was scarce and you would have to go out having, particular coverings and whatever. But everybody knows that. That's nothing new. You're not telling me something that's groundbreaking. Give me something new. Give me something that you thought about. And I looked at him and I said, you did not research this. And then I went on the internet and I researched articles on the social impact of COVID. I found an article. It talked about everything he said, but it went deeper into the psychological ramification. It went deeper into the economical ramifications of COVID with the toilet paper situation. It went deeper into the new surge and of technology and cybersecurity that's happened within less than a year. It went into how these changes are creating a new society. Now, that's interesting. That's what you have to do. Think a little bit deeper, research, because the more you research, the more you learn and the more you have to talk about. Components of a technical report, executive summary, we went through that. Introduction, I included this because it had the word methodology. There are reports that will ask you for your methodology. What method did you use to analyze or research? In quantitative research, the methodology is very important because we have to figure out what you're doing if your methodology is unbiased. There was a doctor once that said that vaccines created autism, and the vaccines that you give kids. And it was funny because years later, another doctor discredited his report because his methodology was incorrect. His methodology was biased. So you have to be careful. Your results, your analysis, your conclusion, your references, the other paper didn't say references, your abstract, the abstract goes at the beginning, your background, you could have maybe in your introduction a little bit of the background of your research, the appendix, and your figure and tables. Okay. I'm skipping now to actually when you read an article. When you read an article, Cornell University uses this reading system that's called SQ4R. SQ4R, I teach it in all my classes, and they're teaching it as young as 4th and 5th grade. SQ4R is just analyzing before you read. So the first thing you do is you survey the paper that you're reading. You scan for specific things like years, like statistics. You're not reading the paper. You're just gliding your fingers through the paper and you're circling important information that sticks out at you. Then you can skim the paper, which is, again, going through the paper quickly, looking at your topic sentences, the first sentence of each paragraph to see what the paragraph is about, just going through, looking at your transitional words, going through the paper to analyze what the paper has to see where specifically you can find the information you're looking for. So you survey, you skim, and you scan. Scan is particular information. Skim is just generally looking through to see what sparks ideas in your brain. This also, when you're surveying and you're going to read something, if you're going to read a book, you look at the cover page. You look at the author. Who's the author? You may look at a little biography about the author. You can look at the back page. You could look at the foreword. There are so many things, the table of contents. So when you're reading a book, before you even read the book, you have information in your head about the book. You can question yourself. Question yourself about what's the importance of this topic? How does it relate to my topic? How does this information relate to something I already know? What am I looking for? The what, where, how, everything. You're just like questioning yourself. And while you're questioning yourself, you're just doodling and making notes with words and phrases. Okay? Then you read the article. Here you read the article and you make sure that you have a highlighter. You can't highlight more than 10% of your page. You circle, you highlight, and in the margins of the paper, I usually write a word or two with each paragraph or a phrase for each paragraph that's going to help me summarize that paragraph. You can go through when you read and the whole article, then you can go back and you can recite if there's something important that you have to learn or something important that you have to memorize or something that you want to paraphrase or summarize in your own words. When I paraphrase and I summarize in my own words, usually I make believe, because I used to have, when I was a kid, a photographic memory, but I still, without wanting to, plagiarize because I have to be careful that I don't use the exact words I was reading. So what I do is I make believe there's an imaginary person next to me and I summarize what the article says, so that way I can make sure that I'm not plagiarizing. Relate the article to your own topic, related to your past, related to your life. That's going to help you remember things. Review. Review is that you go through everything that you highlighted, you circled, you review that. And basically, you can make a summary of a paper in 1, 2, 3 using the boldings, using the captions and the pictures, just getting the general idea of what that article is about. I mentioned plagiarism because plagiarism is a big no-no. I was at a meeting, all professors, it must have been over 200 of us in a hotel, and it was a meeting for us, and they were teaching us about writing. And in that meeting, they mentioned plagiarism, because plagiarism is easy to do. Sometimes you plagiarize unconsciously. It has happened to me. And I make sure that I go back. I'm saying, oh, wait, this sounds too familiar. Or even using safe assign, even though it's your enemy, you think safe assign is your enemy, is really your friend, because it's telling you what parts you plagiarize. And if your professor lets you, turn the paper in twice, fantastic, then you can correct those parts. Notice how I said those parts, not a whole paragraph, not a whole essay, okay? It would just be maybe a certain parts. So to avoid plagiarism, and very important, in that convention I was at, they were mentioning the story of an engineer. It just so happens to have been an engineer who had his own company, was very well known, and somebody from his past turned around and said, I don't know why he's so important and he's so big. He plagiarized. So that person actually accused him of plagiarism, called the university and said, this guy plagiarized. Everything he had wasn't his own words. And when it comes to publications or in the future, you want to make sure that you have nothing plagiarized on that paper, because you can honestly be sued by the author of that original work. I have seen papers that I'm reading the example of the original paper and the plagiarized paper, and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking it's totally different, but it's not. You just have to be so very careful with this. Incidentally, that engineer lost his bachelor's degree, which made him lose his master's degree, which made him lose all the certificates he had, which made him lose his company, which made him lose his life. So you cannot plagiarize. Be organized and start early. Avoid plagiarism. Record information sources. It's so easy. If you're using somebody's exact words, use quotation marks. Mind you, do not write a whole essay with quotation marks. Paraphrase or reword your information. Okay, sometimes even sometimes the phrases I write or the words I write on the paper, when I go to type it in full sentences, which I don't write my capstone or my papers on paper. I type them on the computer and I edit them on the computer. I find it too hard to write on paper and then transfer them to the computer. It's double duty, so I don't do that. Make sure that when you're transferring the information onto the computer with the words and phrases you have on your paper, that you find a creative way of maybe transposing the sentence, putting the back part first, or just making it different, or changing a word, using the thesaurus to change a word so you can avoid plagiarism. Reference all sources. Every body paragraph should have a citation. And every citation should have a reference. This is no if, buts, or maybes, and you should be using the APA format for references and for papers. especially your capstones, research paper, technical papers. They're so much easier to read if they're double space. Ask your teacher or librarian for help. Okay, that's very important. Also, I mentioned before summary. Summary is when you read an article and you pick up from that article maybe 10% of what that article is. So if you have an article that is only one page and you turn in half a paragraph, half a page of a paragraph, something's wrong. Something's wrong. You're repeating information, or you're summarizing incorrectly, or you're using your own ideas, because it should be only a 10% of your original paper. You can paraphrase, and paraphrase is when you put things in your own words. And you can synthesize. Synthesize is the example of when you have bullets. Say bullet number 1 and bullet number 4 and bullet number 7 say more or less the same thing. Make a sentence out of it. Bullet number 2, bullet number 3, and bullet number 5 more or less talk about the same subject, the same thing. Make another sentence out of it. See, that's called synthesizing. When you get information and you make it into a shorter version, and you're picking up information from various parts. In the case of bullet points, for some reason or another, my students love to copy paste the bullet points just like they are. Don't do that. Don't do that. That's plagiarism. Okay? Now, finally, begin with the end in mind. Stephen Covey is a famous author, a motivational speaker, and he's done many workshops, and I took one of his workshops once. He believes in time management. That's very important when you're going to do a capstone or a research paper. If you know that you are doing a capstone or a research paper, start at the very beginning of your bachelor's degree thinking, what am I going to write about? So begin with the end in mind. That's very important. So basically, that is my presentation, the 4 parts of how to write a research paper. And here I'm going to stop sharing. And thank you so very much for participating with me. Any questions? You can always call me at 407-222-1638. I'll be happy to help you. And happy writing.